Hello and welcome back to Bookish, and welcome to my Saturday Hodgepodge for this week. Just my weekly wrap-up of booktube stuff, book stuff, sometimes YouTube stuff. I'm going to use my Saturday Hodgepodge this week to just kind of do a wrap-up of what I read in May, and then a TBR for June, and then talk about just a couple of other things going on. I want to kind of put a cap on my thoughts about MaybeMidrash, one of the great events that took place this month, and then just recommend a couple of new channels. So I kind of participated a little bit in a number of reading events that took place this month. I did participate in the Asian Readathon. I picked I picked one fiction book that qualified, and that was a book that's a collection of 4 short novels by Kenzaburo Oe called Teach to Outgrow Our Madness. I wish I could say that I liked these novels, these stories, but really only one of them, which I think was called A Prize Stock, that I really liked. The other 3 seem to be kind of closely related to one another and to use the same characters in a lot of the same situations. And they were pretty intensely strange. And it's not that Prize Stock wasn't, but I just thought it was just kind of a really good story in and of itself. Not a huge fan, but there was one of the stories in there was good. Also, something qualified for the Asian Readathon was How to Practice the Way to a Meaningful Life by the Dalai Lama. Now, I didn't necessarily pick this up because of Asian Readathon. I picked it up because this was a part of my MaybeMidrash kind of project that I gave myself. What I wanted to understand better was the Buddhist concept of what I'm going to call lightness. That is that ability to free yourself from kind of earthly, for lack of a better term, worries and earthly concerns. It's always one of the things about Buddhism that has puzzled me. And this is a pretty great book as a primer, just kind of an introductory thing to Buddhism, and as I've been told by people I've spoken to, specifically Tibetan Buddhism, more than just other branches of Buddhism. And it kind of gave me an answer to that question. And what I was interested in doing then for MaybeMidrash was pairing what I learned about the Buddhist concept of lightness with this book called, with Milan Kundera's novel from the 1980s called The Unbearable Lightness of Being, in which the two of the main characters are kind of presented with this option of, do they choose to live a life of lightness, that is, a life free of responsibility, a life in which they flee from love and relationships, or do they embrace those things even though those things weigh them down? And I found the book to be a really pleasant reread. I was a little worried when I went back to it that I would like it less. I do acknowledge that the main male character, Tomash's attitude towards women for much of the book, I think you could call at least somewhat misogynistic, but the book as a whole isn't. The character may be, but the book isn't, because you do get to see the flip side of Tomash's character with Sabina, and to be inside her mind and her thinking. And she is a complete character as well. So I enjoyed this. I have a video about these things which you may or may not have watched, which you can find on my channel. So that was my MaybeMidrash reading. Also this year I have kind of pledged that I'm going to try to read more genre fiction, just because I don't read a lot of genre fiction outside of detective stories. And so I picked up The Lathe of Heaven by Ursula K. Leguin, one of the great writers and science fiction writers, I think, of the last part of the 20th century, and somebody whose work I've read before. I think I read The Left Hand of Darkness a long time ago. So I picked this up to kind of, read some science fiction this month, because that's not something I normally read. And I think Le Guin is a great storyteller, and I think that her writing is really evocative and good and clear and relatively simple and straightforward in a way that takes far more skill than I think people give it credit. But in the end, I have to admit that I kind of ran into this problem I run into sometimes with science fiction as a genre, and that is that Le Guin spends a lot of time creating what I think is a really interesting story, and then she just kind of says aliens, and that's how the story kind of ends, is that things are sorted out in part because of aliens. And that to me just felt a little bit too easy for the really interesting story that she had told. Also, I reread The Crossing by Cormac McCarthy. This is a part of my effort to reevaluate the Border Trilogy by Cormac McCarthy. Last month I read All the Pretty Horses, and I did a review of that, which you can find on my channel here. And this month I read The Crossing, which, I always said was my favorite of the Border Trilogy books, and I would say for the first 130, 140 pages that holds true, that I really like what would be Section 1 of this book. I'm not as big a fan of Section 2 of the book, and I'll do a complete review of this probably early in June and have that video posted. But I didn't like it as much the second time as I did the first time, which I have to tell you is not always the case, but it appears to be the case here. Anyway, I'll get my thoughts together and do a more complete review of The Crossing, and then by the time you see this, I should be finished reading Tar Baby by Toni Morrison. A part of the Toni Morrison 2020 read-along group, in which we're attempting to read all of Morrison's novels, all 11, one a month in 2020, and this is her fourth novel, Tar Baby. And I have to say that part maybe of why I seem kind of negative towards Cormac McCarthy is that I picked up Toni Morrison after him, and his writing and his books pale by comparison. I don't think there are very many people who would say that Tar Baby is Toni Morrison's best book, but it is still written with the skill and the insight and the intelligence that's present in all her work. And I think in this book she was trying to do something different. She was trying to stretch herself and prove that she could write essentially, any kind of novel she chose to, and I think she has here. So I'm looking forward to finishing this up, so it'll be done by the end of May, and really enjoying that. So next month is June, and I've probably overbooked myself for June. I have 2 buddy reads which I'm really looking forward to. I'm going to be reading The House on Endless Waters by Emuna Elon with Britta Bowler. It's a buddy read I'm doing with her. This is a novel translated from the Hebrew, a writer I've never read before, and I get to read it with Britta Bowler. That is a great thing, and I'm really looking forward to getting started on that early in June. I'm also reading the second book in N.K. Jemison's Broken Earth trilogy, and that's Obelisk Gate, and I'm buddy reading this with Lukash. We haven't set up exactly when or a schedule, but he and I are going to be buddy reading this, and I'm looking forward to that because I really liked the 5th season, which was the first novel in that trilogy, and this would, I think, qualify again for a fantasy novel that I'm reading this year, and again kind of trying to read more genre fiction this year. I also want to participate in reading for Pride Month. I'm not exactly sure which of the various Pride Month read-alongs I'm going to participate in, but I've already picked out my books. So the first book I want to read for Pride Month is Magic for Liars. This is by Sarah Gailey. Sarah Gailey is the author of the Hippo duology, which I just loved. 2 relatively short novels about an alternate history in which feral hippos roam the swamps of Louisiana, which I just loved. Sarah Gailey is a non-binary author, and they wrote this book and published it last year, and so I've had it for a little while. I'm looking forward to getting to that. I'm also going to be reading Fun Home by Alison Bechtel. This is a graphic memoir. I believe Alison Bechtel identifies as a lesbian, but she may be non-gender conforming, so I'm not exactly sure. I tried to find what her pronoun was, and I couldn't. So I'm looking forward to reading this. This is kind of a classic, I think, considered a classic within the world of graphic novels, even though that isn't all that old. I know I got this copy because my son was deciding to read this for one of his college classes a few years ago. So I'm looking forward to that. Oh, by the way, also, this would be a graphic novel, which I don't normally read, which would also be me reading more fiction outside of what I normally read. I wanted to read, this month I want to read Ian Forster's Maurice or Morris. I hear the booktubers I follow who are from England, they say Morris. I'm going to go with Morris then because Forster was English himself. This is kind of one of the early, I think, classic works of literature featuring a gay character, and so I wanted to read that this month. And then kind of an American classic of gay literature is Tales of the City by Armistead Maupin, which I want to get to this month. This book came pretty highly recommended by Graham from the archive, and so I'm looking forward to that. But that's already 6 books, and if you know anything about me, you know I'm a slow reader, and 6 books is going to be a bit of a challenge. Buddy Reads, by the way, usually help me read a little bit faster. But on top of that, I'm also down to judge the BookTube Prize this month. I believe the semifinals start on the 1st of June, and I'm not sure if I'm doing fiction or nonfiction, but I will have BookTube Prize judging to do. So there's that. I also want to just kind of finish out MaybeMidrash today by making sure, if you are interested in this discussion of, you know, religion and evaluating religion and religious thought and thinking discussion, that you are aware of some of the great videos that have come out. Now, if you've seen Steve Donoghue's channel or others, you're probably aware of these, but I'm going to go ahead and leave links to those Midrash videos down below. I'm not going to mention them all here, but I will leave links to them down below. Well, I think I'll mention them. So, for instance, Jason from Byways and Bookland did a great video. Steve has a great video about atheism. Lukash has great videos about atheism and agnosticism. Jason from Old Blues Chapter and Verse has a great video. Let's see, the fellas over at Codex Cantina have a great video they just put up, I think, this week about Shintoism. Noah from Everyone Who Reads Must Converse. I'm pretty sure he has more than 2 videos about Buddhism, but anyway, I'll leave links to those videos down below because I think those were really great, and I just kind of wanted to cap my MaybeMidrash discussion here and participation here by talking about my own participation in this. You know, I made a video related to the unbearable lightness of being and lightness and the concept of lightness in Buddhism. But I was also really active in other people's comment sections on their MaybeMidrash videos, and so I wanted to start off by apologizing for comments that I made, which may have seemed like I was being overly aggressive, or may have seemed like I was trying to prove the person wrong. I'll tell you up front, and I think I've said this, I have no interest in disproving anyone's belief about religion. Agnosticism, atheism, Christianity, Buddhism, Shintoism, Taoism, Hinduism, Islam, etc. I have no interest in disproving or challenging anyone's faith, but I am really curious for where people draw that line between, do they have any faith or belief in anything mystical, anything supernatural, anything, you know, that might in any way constitute a force on the earth or in the world that's not explainable by science. And, you know, one of the things that occurred to me when doing all this is, and one of the things I'll just tell you about myself is, I think that almost all human beings, it's on some level, I'm not saying every single one, I'm saying almost all, on some level have some kind of mystical, supernatural belief that's almost ingrained in them. So if you ever even just feel unlucky, well, in a sense, then you believe in luck. If you have any kind of superstition, like simply knocking on wood, which I do all the time, then there's a belief in some kind of mystical force. If you believe in premonitions, that you can know when something bad's about to happen, then you believe in some kind of mystical, supernatural force. If you believe that you have the ability to commune with animals in a way that other people don't have, that you have some kind of special ability to understand and know them, and they understand you and you understand them, well, I don't think you can prove that scientifically. You know, I think that we all kind of have these beliefs, and what I'm really interested in is finding out, and I'm curious about, is finding out where people draw those lines. Now, for myself, I'm confident in what I believe. I'm comfortable with what I believe, but I am oftentimes looking, as I was with the question about Buddhism, to see if there is a religious organization or a set of religious beliefs that aligns with my own, which would provide me with some kind of practice, some kind of, not necessarily a way to change my faith or grow my faith, but some kind of way to to kind of structure and to be more, as Buddhists would say, to be more mindful in my life about the things I believe and what I should be doing and what I want to see happen. Anyway, there are my last thoughts on MaybeMidrash. Please feel free in the comment section down below to tell me I'm wrong about all of it. I also wanted to just shout out 2 channels that I just found relatively recently. One is called Dancing Lawn. She recently posted a video about getting a PhD with some advice, but she also talks about books, a lot of interesting discussions about books, and then also fully booked is another new channel I found. I think that she actually has an advanced degree. I want to say it's in science, but she reads a lot of really interesting books too. I'll leave links to those 2 channels down below, and I hope you'll go check them out. If you like their content, that you'll subscribe to them. Anyway, there you go. There's my weekly wrap-up, my Saturday Hodgepodge. Please feel free to leave me any comments or questions in the comment section below, and as always, thank you for watching.